Assalamu alaikum everyone, this is Taimoor Ali, Head of Private Sector Engagements at Karandaaz Digital Financial Services. Today we are starting a series of interviews with industry experts in the fintech world. The series of interviews is called Karandaaz Fintech Talks, and today we are going to hold an interview with a very exciting personality. Karandaaz believes in innovation and disruption which has positive outcomes on a common man. And we work towards the financial inclusion in Pakistan. Without further delay, I'd like to introduce this phenomenal person, Omer Bin Ahsan, CEO, Haball Pakistan. Haball has been able to take up the challenge of digitizing value chains and supply chains in Pakistan, and also to disrupt with digital payments on real-time basis. So Omer, thank you very much for coming for this interview. And we'd like to know what Haball is and what is the idea behind it.
Thank you, Taimoor, for that introduction. So, Haball is an Arabic word. It means the jugular vein that connects the heart to the mind. And I felt that the digital financial world was not seamlessly integrated to the corporate supply chains with the way that they are processing their order, invoice, shipment information. And so, Haball is a platform that enables supply chain integration into the digital financial services world. So that's the conduit that Haball provides, which is why we called it Haball, which means rope or the jugular vein.
So yeah, finally I know what Haball is, and this is a very unique name that you've chosen for your company. So we move towards our second question, which is how does the Haball vision and mission contributes towards enabling a DFS ecosystem in Pakistan?
So what I'd like to call this is a top-down approach. There are some fantastic organizations who are working towards the consumer market, such as consumer fintechs, whether it is PSO, PSPs or EMIs or the banks themselves, and a lot of other fintechs that are working in the space. Haball thought that the best approach towards financial inclusion is the top-down approach. We felt that the sheer size and magnitude of financial literacy and transformation cannot happen alone at the back of the DFS world. It has to have other contributors to it, like the government is playing a very strong role, but we felt that the corporations were not part of that loop. And since there's a lot of incentive for them to get digitized across their supply chains, Haball takes the corporate route for supply chain enablement, for supply chain digitization and payment adoption. So that's the way we feel that inclusion will happen when all of these corporate supply chains, or most of these corporate supply chains that have a very pervasive access across every street of Pakistan, are able to become ambassadors for digital financial literacy. So that's what Haball does. The way we enable these corporate sales teams or the distributors, their order bookers, a delivery man, enables the digital financial conversation to hit every street corner of Pakistan.
So I believe the idea is to digitize each node, link the two nodes, and then the digital payments in order for the value chain to have a visibility on the digital ordering and the digital payments as well.
Absolutely.
And that's in itself is an excellent concept to start off with. I move towards now asking specifically about Karandaaz and Haball partnership. Could you please shed some light on what this project is and what is the goal for you in this partnership?
So we've been working a lot with, for a very long time, talking to Karandaaz. We've been sharing a lot of ideas, and there's a great deal of good work that Karandaaz has done over the years in trying to develop the digital financial services market. Last year, we did something very similar with the central bank where we were piloting a certain kind of transaction to see what happens. And at this stage, financial inclusion does require a lot of piloting and experimenting, seeing what sort of incentive structures, what kind of ground forces are required, what kind of platform is required to make this concept work. So the interesting thing that happened with Karandaaz is that we were able to come up with the concept that serves dual purpose. One is the consumer to retailer transaction getting digitized, that if there is enough incentive for the retailer, that he would then enable digital acceptance at his till, whether it's through QR or through POS or whatever means that he's getting those digitally accepting payments. And the idea is that since Haball has integrated the whole value chain from the distributor, sub-distributor to the retailer level, that there is enough incentive for the retailer to start accepting payments digitally. Vice versa, for Haball, it's important that these cash-ins are happening digitally so that he can continue paying digitally. The biggest problem for Haball right now for retail to distributor payments is that the retailer is receiving cash but is expected to pay upwards by digital means. So it serves both purposes, where we're experimenting how retail to distributor transactions can happen, and our partners in this pilot, such as EasyPaisa and Jazz Cash, are experimenting how that value chain end node integration would enable digital acceptance at the retail level.
So this is an exciting concept, and Karandaaz is also very looking forward to the results of this partnership. And we would like to see that if the upstream of the value chain is flooded with digital payments,
Yes.
that should have an impact on the downstream, where consumers are going to pay to the retailer digitally, and the retailer is going to accept that payment because in return he has to pay digitally to the upstream.
Yeah.
So moving here, Omer, please shed some light on what is that sweet spot of disruption that you've been able to pull off in digitization of the value chains that should result in the digitization of payments as well. This is a very linked question to the previous one that we have talked to.
Yeah.
But please be specific on the sweet spot that you think has been
Okay.
able to make you successful.
So I'll throw some numbers from whatever data that's available and reliable. But if you look at $125 billion that moves from the manufacturer to the distributor to sub-distributors and wholesalers, and then to the retailer, and from the retailer to the consumer, from a banker's perspective or from a fintech's perspective, that's $125 billion multiplied by 4, because that's money moving in 4 hops. So all of the fintechs are working on the consumer to retail aspect, whether it's on e-commerce or at the retail level. But then Haball is looking at the bigger chunk of $125 billion, and that's just structured and organized sector. So the informal segment is probably 3 times bigger than that. So that's the big area that we want to focus on, which was traditionally served by closed loop cash management systems and primarily cash. And there's a lot of liquidity problem that comes with that informality, that you have a lot of revolving checks and third-party payments. A lot of this traffic is unregistered. So the sweet spot that Haball is trying to position itself into is that we sell the platform and spread it downstream to the corporate manufacturer. We focus on the digitization effort that's built around the distributors. That's the capture that we want to focus on, rather than trying to connect to each retail point, because that requires a lot of ground forces, and a lot of organizations are burning a lot of rubber in trying to do that. That's fantastic work. Someone still needs to do that heavy lifting. But for a fintech, it's really about surgical precision towards the supply chain enablement at the top level, and then cascading it downstream. And that's the sweet spot that we're working hard towards.
Yeah, again, it is very important to understand that being a fintech only is not about integrating digital payments only.
Yeah.
I think in digitization of value chains, what's important is to go on the ground, enable these players. Maybe you have to act like a software house to help them digitize and then link their payments to their digital ordering.
Absolutely.
And that is, I think, the sweet spot that you've been able to pull off. So moving forward, do digital payments impact positively on a common man? What is the value that going cashless brings in to a life of a simple common person on ground?
Well, there's the citizen's obligation to be, a conscious taxpayer that contributes towards the society, irrespective of his income. So that's a obligation in terms of the social contract that we have with the country that we live in. So going cashless, going digital contributes towards a more transparent economy. So there is that moral obligation that we all carry, and we should all work towards it. That applies to everyone, irrespective of your incomes. But in terms of advantages, obviously there is the facilitation, the ease, the time that's spent visiting branches or managing these reconciliation or managing proof in an environment where the state is becoming more pervasive towards the transparency of transactions. We're living in a post-FATF world. It's very important that we're able to track our transactions, and it's just easier for any common person to track the set of transactions that they've done when it's all through digital mediums. because they have that record available with them. But the facility, the access, the democratizing capability that cashless payments would provide from any income bracket is the real power that cashless digital payments would contribute towards the common man. And that's more of an awareness thing. I don't think the market can continue in a way where discounts and incentives are the only tricks of the trade to make him adopt. It is really about being aware that it's a better life, it's a lifestyle choice to go digital, that it is contributing towards a more efficient liquidity for the entire value chain, and that it is our moral obligation as citizens of the state that we need to be as transparent as we can towards our financial transactions.
Yeah, and to mention here that the problem that cash brings in itself are to be fought with.
Yes.
And I think it's very important for typically Pakistani to go cashless and support the whole ecosystem of our economy.
Yeah.
Moving forward, I'd like to hear from you, in your opinion, what are the key ingredients of creating or transitioning towards a digital economy? And please do mention the role of the key stakeholders in the value chain,
Right.
where people or where the institutions are responsible for pulling off this transition towards a digital ecosystem.
So I'll come back to the name Haball. Obviously there's a Quranic reference here that it is something that binds everyone together, and the way at least we've tried to do it is remain agnostic, remain non-exclusive. It's a camp that everyone can come together. So we integrate into the big banks, to the medium-sized banks, to the branchless providers, without getting into their domain, without getting into the war of deposits, without getting into the lending function and the profits that come out of it. That's something that we've always stayed away from, and I think that at least what I'm striving to achieve is really create that collaboration where it doesn't hurt anyone and everyone is incentivized to participate in it, so that they can get access to the supply chains that we've enabled. So collaboration obviously is a very key ingredient that can happen, and collaboration in Pakistan usually is very bilateral, very tight-lipped, under covers. It needs to come out, the industry needs to galvanize itself. We're seeing associations being formed, the regulator playing a very active role in engaging stakeholders to decide on policy matters. So that's very important. Collaboration with corporate institutions, with financial institutions, with fintechs, with the regulator is very important. There has to be an active voice. The second part is more to do with the government, that whether it's creating an enabling environment in terms of the tax environment, sort of shepherding the market towards more digital adoption and disincentivizing cash. More importantly, that they need to take the responsibility of awareness, which the government does create a lot of awareness campaigns when they feel that there's something of national significance. The same kind of narrative that we've seen in the recent few years, that digital has become mainstream narrative, that's part of every conversation, whether it's with the Federal Board of Revenue or the State Bank of Pakistan or the political government that's in charge. So that's very important, and I think all of those things are happening right now. They just need to be better organized and continued in the same spirit. We still need to gallop ahead. Setbacks usually stop that kind of march forward, but right now, whether it's the regulator or these institutions, they really need to galvanize and keep on working towards. It can't be done by one organization, it can't be done by one set of regulations. It's not a responsibility for just the PSO, PSPs or the EMIs or the branchless banks or the new digital banks that come or the fintechs that have suddenly sprouted. It's everyone's effort, and I think all our ships are sailing in the same direction. We just need to keep going forward with it.
So, this has been an exciting journey. Could you please share some inspiring stories that you might have come across in, setting up Haball, that might, further inspire people in this industry, and what do you feel has been the key in this journey that has been able to bring in a lot of people with you, whether it be collaboration on the external side or creating a team which is an enabler for you?
Yeah, so, well, it's a journey that is still in progress, perhaps still in its infancy. So I'm not at a vantage point where I'm looking back at things right now. I think there's a lot that we have to learn. There's a lot that we still have to prove. Where we are is more or less platform readiness. This year is, and the years going ahead are going to be about operational scale up and really going to the streets. Obviously, like any startup journey or any organization that you're trying to establish, it's a very painful process. It's very challenging, but Alhamdulillah, I look at every aspect of the trials and the errors, all the things that you've done. They contribute towards your growth. They make you smarter. Conversing, the biggest anxiety that I had back in 2018 was my first few conversations with the large corporations. Would they buy in? And what was inspiring was when the customer made their mind, then they started educating you in more ways of how this could work, of what else they draw in terms of benefits. We have a return on investment calculator that pretty much comes out of the customer education that we received. We did not know the kind of savings that could come out of that. We had a fair idea, but we were talking about, we were just guessing numbers. But now we were very specific about what you save, the time that you save, the money that you save year on year by digitizing your supply chains, the kind of transparency that you get. So what's inspirational is that in your journey, you'll realize that your customers will become your advocates. Your customers will educate you, both good and bad customers. They'll educate you about your shortcomings and how you can turn this around, because obviously they're also invested in the idea. They also want to see this happen for their own organizations. So that's the inspiring aspect. One of the things that I've always told my team is that, especially what we're doing here at Haball, we are managing corporate payments, and these are large sums of payments that have to be processed. People have to trust Haball. Trust is at the center of everything, and I think it applies to any fintech in Pakistan. You're dealing with people's trust, and if your own governance, if your own ability to sell them based on truth, based on an honest expose of what the product does and what it cannot do, your ability to be absolutely compliant to the regulations, even for the unregulated fintechs that are operating, the quasi or transitive regulations that do apply on them because they're working with a bank or a PSO PSP, they have to be very conscious of that. And I think one of the things that we were very conscious about from day one was, we can fish out a lot of emails and a lot of lectures that I've given my team, is that the center of Haball has to be trust. If they cannot trust you, we will not gain currency. So that's probably the most inspiring thing that has come out of this, is that have your customers trust you, and that can only happen through a very honest sales mechanism where you're not exaggerating to sell a product, that you're delivering what you're capable of delivering, that you're committing timelines that you can deliver. And if you are honest with your stakeholder partners, whether it's the banks who collaborate with us, whether it's the PSO PSPs that work with us, there has to be an honest relationship. And that's the kind of relationships that will drive permanence for your organization.
Yeah, perhaps honesty and trust are the fundamentals of creating a model which is innovative and disruptive. And I think that is what you've been able to achieve. And I wish that there are more such entities successful in Pakistan for the uplift of fintech sector, and for the eventual financial inclusion of the people. Moving towards the end of our interview, I'd like to speak a few words with the viewers and convey your message that you have to tell them.
So I would say that the digital financial services industry it's a very exciting time to be in it. It's a very exciting time for experimenting new business models. I think that there is no shortcut to these things. Now that I've spent a considerable time doing this, there is no shortcut. You have fantastic people in the industry, fantastic organizations who are willing to help you out. The regulator itself, I mean, Haball is a classical example of the regulator making an intervention and trying to cover an area that nobody was entering, which is supply chain enablement, supply chain payments. And we're indebted to the central bank in terms of the help that they provided in that. You have to ask for help from people who are experts in the industry. Take them into confidence. Make sure that your governance, make sure that your business model has been checked out by experts. That's very important. Validation at every stage is important, not at the fundamental stage, but at every stage of your journey, you need to keep asking questions from the people who know their stuff. And then a lot of perseverance. If there is no harm in the kind of capital you generate, whether it's VC funded or private equity, or you're putting your own money into it, but as long as your stakeholders are aligned, their expectations are clear. Pakistan is an asymmetric economy. You don't know what's going to lift you up, and you don't know what's going to throw you down. And we've faced it, I thought 2018 was going to be a fantastic year for Haball, or 2019 was going to be a fantastic year. It wasn't. I thought 2020 COVID was going to be a bad year for Haball. It was completely opposite of that. So you really don't know what's going to hit you, but it's your perseverance. It's sticking to. There's a classical example, and if my team is hearing, they'll probably get bored by me mentioning it again. I always draw back from a series between West Indies and Australia when Glenn McGrath used to bowl to Brian Lara, and he had about 6 people in the slip. It was always a good length ball that was leaving the batsman with the hope that there would be a nick and they'll catch. And he consistently did that. That's what we have to do. We have to consistently ball the same line and length. The catches will come.
Absolutely. So thank you very much for joining us today. I'll see you again in the next session of Karandaaz Fintech Talks with another phenomenal personality from the fintech world. Signing off now, Taimoor Ali. Thank you very much.